this is Dr. Katie from Craig Chiropractic and Kinesiology, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about shoulder pain. So shoulder pain is very common, unfortunately, and many people actually aren't aware that chiropractors can help with shoulder pain. Like a lot of times people think that chiropractors only adjust the back or the spine, but we can adjust anywhere in the body that basically has a bone that is shifted out of place. So we're not limited to just the spine. We can do hands, wrists, elbows, arms, legs, you name it. We can adjust it and help reset it. Now, getting into shoulder injuries specifically, shoulders can be quite complicated. It is a very moving joint that we all use. It's essentially a ball and socket joint that's very shallow. It's not nice and deep like the hip ones, very shallow. There's multiple bones that come together to connect this point. We have our collarbone, right? It comes down, your clavicle, and in the back you have your shoulder blade that also comes back and helps form that socket and that joint. Plus we have muscles, just like the upper trap muscle here, the deltoid here, and of course there is many, many more, right? And the muscles that make up all the rotator cuff muscles. Okay, so I want to give you a little backstory about myself and why I got so interested in shoulder injuries. So I have actually dealt with shoulder injuries myself. So they first started when I was in chiropractic school, or I should say more manifested when I was in chiropractic school. I personally believe my original shoulder injuries came from working with horses as a teenager. And then the final straw to my shoulder pain was while playing volleyball with some friends. Now for me, I'd always had some wear and tear on the shoulders, working with horses, things like that. But when I was playing volleyball one day with some friends, I was diving for a ball, right? I should have been able to hit up. And instead I slipped on the grass we were playing on, and my arm, I just went one arm up, and it was a very hard ball that came down and hit me right here. So you can see that would put a lot of stress into this joint. In fact, my joint actually cavitated or popped, right? You know, that really loud popping noise. So that was one of the loudest ones I've ever heard personally. And I remember thinking at the time, like, oh, that can't be good. That's probably bad. But guess what? I had no pain after that. So I did the thing I tell my patients not to do. I just kind of had the mentality, well, there's no pain, it must be fine. So I ignored it and went on with my life. And can I just stand here to just offer caution and warning, just because something doesn't have pain doesn't mean there's not a problem. If I just took that hard of a hit or a blow to the shoulder and it had that loud of a pop, something shifted, and for the long term, it is better to get it checked, okay? Like, I was in chiropractic school at the time. I saw chiropractors all the time when this injury occurred, and I really had no excuse for not getting it checked, but I just helped them with the mentality. It doesn't hurt, it's fine. It didn't start bothering me until I started getting in my adjusting classes, where, you know, the chiropractic field is very physically demanding for the doctor. It requires strong joints and the ability to do our thrusting to help adjust patients. Well, I started developing extreme shoulder pain, okay, with all my thrusts and all my adjustments. It wasn't until my pain developed however many months later that I finally started asking chiropractors to check my shoulder. And sure enough, my shoulder was not sitting properly in the socket. It's like if it's supposed to be sitting like this, she's kind of cocked over. She's still in, she's not dislocated, but she's just not sitting right in there. That pulls rotator cuff muscles, bicep muscles, things are not sitting correctly. And then I try to add a lot of force, like a thrust in, kind of like throwing a punch in a way. You try to throw a punch if things are not mechanically sound, and it causes problems. So I was dealing with all kinds of shoulder pain. It was very bad. It started becoming like this gnawing, aching, fairly constant pain. It was keeping me from sleeping at night. I was getting to the point where even just like trying to push open a door was killing me. Just putting my elbow on a table was killing me. And I was trying to keep up with my classes. I didn't want to fall behind. And, you know, for me, I didn't take off the proper time to rehab because I would have had to fall behind in school. But I saw basically as many different chiropractors as I could, all different kinds, very good doctors. I saw specifically sports chiropractors that worked with professional athletes. You know, I went to acupuncturists, I talked to massage therapists that I knew, I talked to personal trainers that I knew, and I even did PT exercises that were recommended by some PTs. So I really tried a lot of the different, recommended things. Everyone talks about the rehab, do resistance bands, do the stretches. And to be perfectly honest, I didn't start getting relief till I actually found Dr. Craig here. So this is Craig Chiropractic and Kinesiology. Dr. Craig is the founder of this clinic and is my boss and mentor here. He was the first one who actually figured out what was going on with my shoulder. He figured out that I had something called an AC sprain. So your collarbone or clavicle comes up to about this point. It's about here. And then you have your shoulder blade. There's a little bony kind of prominence that comes off, okay? It's called the acromion. This is your clavicular, so it's called your acromion clavicular joint. It's about in this area. So that's called your AC joint, okay? So picture it, it's like these two bones. They're supposed to be sitting like this. There's a ligament that spans them, and that ligament's supposed to be nice and tight, holding those together. Well, something I was not aware of till I met Dr. Craig was that joint can sprain. You know, like when you roll your ankle, how you can roll it and it sprains and things get overstretched and the ankle's a little loosey-goosey and unstable? That can happen in the shoulder. That joint, instead of being nice and tight, can start to ever so slightly come apart and start doing more movement than what should be. Okay, now there's different grades of sprains. Like a full tear obviously requires surgery typically. Moderate tears you just kind of monitor. In my case, I did not have full tearing or anything like that, but I had enough of the separation and enough of this kind of loosey-goosey situation that it was causing me to have a very unstable shoulder. You know, this is supposed to be nice and tight. So when I move, it's stable. Mine wasn't. In response, a lot of times the body now locks up this upper trap, seizes up tight to provide stability here that's not there because it doesn't want this all moving around. So I had a lot of neck pain, headaches, shoulder, you want to talk about shoulder knots, everything. It wasn't until we started getting stability. You know, everybody wanted to adjust this joint and be like, hey, we got to get it moving, we got to get adjusted. That's what we do as chiropractors. This was a time and place where I was getting over-adjusted on top of everything else. I had to actually go ahead and form stability. So using things like K-taping. I did some resistance training. I had to adapt how I adjusted my patients, so I gave it time to heal. For me, resistance training wasn't even enough. For me, I had so much adrenal fatigue and stress that affected the integrity of my ligaments that I had to do a lot with things like my nutrition, my food sensitivities, my stress levels, my hormonal balances, things like that. So mine was a long-term thing. So I developed these shoulder injuries. They hung on for several years before I was able to start getting relief, and then it took me a couple years to fully get it back. But I'm just here to tell you that we can work with shoulder injuries. If we catch them early, it doesn't have to turn into a case like what mine was. If we catch them soon enough, if they are bad, you know what? We'll take the time and we'll unwind them together. So I just want to share a little bit about my story. If you want to learn a little bit more of how I treat shoulders, stay tuned for a future video. Maybe I'll do a part 2 of this one and we'll pick up next time. All right, thank you guys.